Florida State locks in an official visit with a key 2025 prospect.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and college football writer. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. I am on the road in Orlando, Florida, on just about the Disney property as we get ready for the Under Armour All-American practices to start on Monday and Tuesday. But today was media day. And I got a chance to interview literally 30 players today and had some conversations with some others. Going to talk about some overall Noles stuff here in just a little bit on the recruiting front. But first off, we're going to talk about Zahir Mathis, a kid that's a really good football player out of the Philadelphia area, one of the top pass rushers in the United States, offers galore, and he's going to make his next official visit to Tallahassee. 6'4", 220-some pounds, top 100 recruit by multiple services. Mathis is the kind of guy that Florida State is famous for getting, but usually they're out of the South. This is a guy, though, that is a big-time talent, again, from the Philly area. Florida State is trying to knock off former leader Ohio State. He was committed there for a long time. Some thought it was going to end up being Penn State. They're still both in the mix. Florida State will get a visit on January 11th. And then after that, he's got to visit the following weekend on the 18th to UCLA. And to wrap it up, he's going to visit Michigan. I assume he's going to sign right on the very first Wednesday in February. It used to be the traditional signing day. Now it's kind of underwhelming in terms of the numbers. But Mathis is a kid that is borderline five-star prospect. So I'd imagine that he's going to get quite a bit of attention. And he's down here at Under Armour. So a couple of thoughts on him overall. Number one, it's a big need for Florida State to get another defensive end from the portal. Well, depending on what you think of him, pot roast and everybody else on the defensive staff, maybe he's the kind of guy because he's so twitchy, he's so long, 220 pounds, 6'4", 6'5". That's what you're looking for in terms of the athleticism because his first step, lateral quickness is all there. Maybe that changes what they do with the portal if they were to get him, and they're going to be able to sell playing time. They lost multiple guys to the portal and graduation. They have an opportunity now to sell that, and it's a different defensive staff. Will he play the same spot James Williams does? That would be my guess, the stand-up spot, but he could be used long-term in different roles. So Mathis would be a huge addition to the 2025 Florida State class. So that class got 20 kids in it. It could expand, but the competition is really, really good. Additionally, I also had a chance to meet with Solomon Thomas again today. He is the former big-time offensive lineman out of Jacksonville Reigns. Ended up signing with LSU after flipping his commitment from Florida State. And I said, here's the floor, man. Just kind of walk me through this. What was the reason that you decided not to go to Florida State and decide on LSU? It was just he and I talking. Nobody else was around. And he said it was basically just all Atkins. This is something I discussed quite a bit here on Locked On Seminoles. You're going to have players that get attached to coaches, and they're going to go to different places. And he took it a step further, which this is crazy. But Atkins said it wouldn't have mattered if Florida State didn't win a game. He was going to go – Thomas said that it didn't matter if Atkins was someplace like Florida State and they didn't win a game. He was going to go to that school wherever Atkins was. He's still in contact with Atkins and talks to him and his family. And it sounds like Atkins might end up in the NFL. So good for him and wherever he ends up. But him not being in Florida State's fold is the reason Solomon Thomas is not. He really likes his chance at LSU. They recruited him hard throughout, which they absolutely did from everything I'd heard anyway, so he confirmed that. And good for them. Thomas is ready to rock and roll and head to LSU. But he said it was nothing that Florida State did wrong. It's just his relationship with Atkins. So take that for what it's worth. Also, just a couple other updates, and we're going to have a whole bunch of videos and photos and stuff on the X page at FBScout_Florida. That's at FBScout_Florida, starting tomorrow night and on Wednesday for the game. But Isaiah Williams, 2026 recruit that was committed to Florida State, is going to head back to visit Tallahassee and the Noles again soon. Florida, Miami, schools across the country. He was committed to Syracuse at one point, are still after him. He's at Tavares High School, just a little bit north of Orlando. one of the best players in the country and definitely in the state of Florida for 26. Florida State needs linebackers, and he could be a pass rusher or a will. He doesn't really care where he plays. Isaiah's a good dude, too. I'm curious to see what he thinks of the new defensive staff at Florida State. He's open-minded. He's not closing the door. And to be honest with you, that's about all you can ask right now. As an overall theme, and it fits in with Isaiah, I asked numerous kids, hey, what's going on with Florida State now? And they're like, well, I've talked to a few of the coaches, but, they just got there. And that's accurate and that's fair. I don't have any problem with the guy just being honest, and everybody was. Like, several of these coaches just got there. Like Isaiah mentioned that Herb Hand and some other guys, he's familiar with them because they came from UCF. But he wants to see how things, like other guys do, how they develop while they're at Florida State. So they just got there. That's cool. But it's good to know guys have their minds open to what Florida State has to offer. So Isaiah Williams, one of the best players in the country, is among them. Also, Simeon Caldwell. This is a young man that I'd mentioned recently here on Locked On Seminoles. Really good linebacker from the greater Jacksonville area. Goes to the Bowl School. His dad's been an NFL coach at linebacker, so he obviously knows the position. And Bowl School is one of the best programs in the state of Florida and the Deep South. Great kid. Penn State, Notre Dame, Florida State, and schools just all over the country are after him. Very well-spoken kid. Really likes studying film and understanding the position. He's a little different than most guys that I run into, no matter where they're from, because he's so dialed in. And again, his dad's been a linebacker coach. That really helps. But he's a very mature young man. And as I mentioned the other day, this is an area Florida State must do better. Jacksonville, Florida. They've got to do better against UF, against Georgia, against Miami, anybody else that comes through their LSU. They have to do better. I'm curious to see where he's going to go. One of the other guys there mentioned to me they thought that Simeon would end up at Notre Dame. I can see that, but he has a lot of Southern schools on his list too. This is going to be a very interesting recruitment. I think it'll carry out until May or June when he takes visits, and I expect FSU to be one of those OVs. And to that end, he'll probably be back sometime this spring, if I was to guess based on our conversation. Simeon Caldwell is a top 250 kid by pretty much everybody, and based on his character and everything, I know if I was coaching that I would recruit him. That's the kind of guy I'd want to have on my team. Finally, Caden Prothro. This is an interesting guy, and I just want to put this in perspective. Like, Naeem Burrows is another guy that's from the same Bowl School. Like, Burrows is probably going to visit Florida State, big-time receiver. Well, Prothro went through it, and like at one point, I think Florida State led. Burrows is open-minded to the staff change. Right now, Prothro is not really looking at Florida State. That's how much things can change. I wanted to bring that up. Sometimes you just got to battle back. I don't know if Florida State will be able to do so. They've tried with him, but right now Florida State is falling way back, and Prothro is possibly a 5-star recruit. Another great kid. Plays at Bowdoin High School in Georgia, one of the best programs in that state. 6'6", 210-pound receivers / tight ends are hard to find. So it'll be interesting if Florida State can get back on him. Burrows is the speedster at the Bowl School. I should have mentioned him already, too. That's the kind of kid that Florida State is famous for getting, that Bowdoin used to get a ton of. You're not going to find many guys like him. Florida State needs more deep speed. They need more guys that are productive, and especially with his personality. Another kid, just tremendous personality. I get it. His brother plays at Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Florida State. It's a who's list, if you will, Texas, Wisconsin. I'm curious to see if Florida State can do much there. Tim Harris Jr. is a really good receiver coach and recruiter, but he's got his work cut out for him. Again, new staff. How does that relate? We'll see what Burrows does, but he does like him quite a bit. Another receiver is Xavier McDonald. He's out of Mississippi. Florida State hasn't had a ton of success in terms of volume out of the state of Mississippi, but they have had guys that were really, really good from there. They always seem to get like 1 or 2 guys out of Mississippi. Next year, the Noles are going to start a corner from Mississippi. So I'm curious how that works out. He said Florida State's one of the schools recruiting him the hardest. He's a top 100, top 150 recruit. Again, Tim Harris is a good recruiter. I have a feeling they're going to get him back on campus. Remember the name Xavier McDonald. And I'm going to end, and I did this intentionally, with the following player. One of the reasons I always followed Florida State and Miami is not just because of the games they played. It's because of the recruiting battles. Well, public school kids in Miami, FSU Miami battles are classic. That could very well be the case for Javari Flowers, cornerback at Miami Northwestern. They just won the state championship. He's open-minded. He doesn't care where he goes in the country, but he said he grew up rooting for both Miami and Florida State. Now, that may sound a little odd to a Miami or Florida State fan, but a lot of kids kind of like both schools because they have connections to their family or whatever to both. So that's fine. But I found it very, very interesting that he said he liked both. And, he's definitely interested in seeing what they both do. As with the other kids, Flowers is a guy that wants to see how the new staff develops. They've got new defensive coaches. We'll see how that goes. But he does know Surtain, obviously, and that's going to help. It's one thing to have a new defensive staff with nobody on it. Like this past year, Michigan, literally their entire staff on defensive side was wiped out. There are some holdovers from the Noles that's going to help. But it's like Tim Harris is from that area. He went to a public school and coached. He was at Booker T. Washington with his dad and then took over when his dad left. Well, this is a circumstance that's very, very similar. You have a young man that is familiar with Surtain because he coached in the year American Heritage. Then he coached at Florida State, and he's still there. So they've got a chance to get a kid away from Miami that's a big-time corner. The Noles could certainly do well with that. Tomorrow, I will have an update later in the evening after I get done with the practices. But this week through the middle of the week are going to be short recruiting updates. Might be able to get something in a traditional format, as you can see for those of you watching on YouTube. This is not my normal setup. I don't even have a microphone here with me. Going to do my best throughout the middle of the week, but we'll get back to normal Locked On Seminoles podcast at the end of this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. I will have as much as I can possibly bring you coming up later this week. Take care, and I will talk to you again soon.